This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rapin. Joining me this week, the rock and scissors of the famed game Rock, Paper, Scissors, Rene Rodriguez.
Snip, snip.
And Nick White.
Rock noise. Perhaps. I don't know.
Slam, crush, roll.
What sound does a boulder make if it falls in the woods?
The joke's done. Thank you guys for joining me today for episode 331 of I Read Comic Books. You know, I said something a long time ago, way back when we recorded episode 300. For all of you hardcore IRCB listeners, back in October, we had a monumental episode with episode 300. I said the show is going to end at 333. We are so close to that number. I feel like this is an omen. Like we might end the show unexpectedly. We don't know why, but it might happen. So I'm feeling weird. But in order to try to prevent that, we have publicly posted A Better Batmobile reading list on Patreon, because I realized that we've been talking about that show nonstop, and I really want folks out there to see what we have in store. There's 3, almost 4 episodes out on Patreon right now. They're all incredible so far. I've listened to them and read everything that's gone on with the series. It's so much fun. I'm going to post a link in the show notes to the Patreon page that has the list of everything that's going to be read as part of that series, just to get folks hyped up, and maybe you want to check out the Patreon because of that. So make sure to grab that in the show notes. It's a really, really great list, and Paul did a fantastic job with this prelude write-up about what the series is about, what Grant Morrison's Batman means to him, and everything. So make sure you check that out. Anyways, we're here to talk about comic books. I guess that's what we do every single week, whether you like it or not. I have 2 legally mandated questions, and that is, how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Nick.
Sure. Absolutely. West Michigan Weather Watch would be, everyone's decided it's time to mow their lawns, and that always means that they want to mow their lawns at like 1 p.m. on Sunday. I can't control it.
Right when we start recording.
I feel like all of the people have it on their calendar. Oh, this is when I Read Comic Books records, so I better disrupt it. So outside of that, it's been good. It's a race weekend for F1. And what that means for Sunday is that I have to absolutely avoid Twitter, CNN, my news app, which, algorithmically, is like, hey, we know that you want news about these topics. And I'm like, not today.
Immediately as the race is happening, right?
Yeah,
we're talking about F-Zero, right?
F-Zero, Captain Falcon. I hope he places first, definitely. Oh my God, I would love that. I would love F-Zero would be real, but
that's money on the table for Nintendo. I can't believe they haven't sponsored an F1 car.
All right, we need to stay focused with this.
Okay, all right, sorry. Go ahead.
They need to make a Captain Falcon livery for a car.
Yes,
that would be perfect. But it's just sort of a half day of me desperately trying to avoid the internet, trying to deliver the content I want, which is the future dystopia that we live in. So anybody listening live, if you post race results, I will, insert Liam Neeson, I will find you, blah, blah, blah. Kevin says his lips are sealed. They better be.
Thanks, Kev. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. So let's talk about what I read. I did read Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles The Last Ronin #2. I think I might have briefly spoken a little about the first issue a while back. So for those unaware, this has a story by Kevin Eastman, Peter Laird of Eastman and Laird TMNT fame. They finally got Laird back in, which is no small accomplishment, because even if you've read sort of the behind the scenes commentary that the two of them wrote for the black and white collections, like, even in text, Laird feels like he doesn't want to be there. And even with just the written word on the page, you can still feel that Eastman and Laird maybe don't quite get along amicably anymore. Like,
interesting.
Like, both of them give feedback on issues, even if only one of them or the other one wrote or drew it. So Laird will be writing about Eastman's issue, and he'll be like, yeah, I don't know what Eastman was trying to do with this plot. It didn't really do anything for me. The art's fine, I guess. Like, and you're thinking, Nick, are you paraphrasing this to be funny? No, I'm not. Like, read it. It's it's very clear they don't quite get along these days.
Interesting.
It's really funny. So if you want to read the black and white collections, go read them. The commentary is hilarious. So they got both of them on board. Maybe each doesn't know the other one was involved. And it's like a parent trap thing where at the end they're like, oh my gosh, they're trying to bring us together. So yeah. And of course, Tom Waltz also did the story. Waltz has been the main story architect of the 2012 IDW reboot, so that fits.
Oh, nice.
Script is by Waltz and Eastman. So because Laird has a story credit, they probably talked to him on the phone for 2 minutes. Layouts are by Eastman. Pencils and inks are by Esau and Isaac Escorza. Sorry, guys, about the name. Ben Bishop and Kevin Eastman. Colors are by Luis Antonio Delgado. Color assistance by Samuel Plata. Letters by Sean Lee. I get that when most people see a credits page this long, like their brain automatically goes to, oh my gosh, this must be DC Comics, and they realize they had a week to finish a book. But with this book, I do really think it is just the natural byproduct of a very ambitious and very like large scale project with a lot of moving pieces. And the more you read the book, the more it becomes very clear that this was like clearly this very well thought out, comprehensive project. And if you're wondering if you need to come into this with either an understanding of Eastman and Laird's original run or the 2012 IDW reboot, the answer is you mostly don't. You'll get a little more mileage if you know about either, but you're definitely not going to feel lost. Like if you know who the Turtles are, if you know who April O'Neil is, if you know who Casey Jones is, if you have an idea of who Shredder is, you're probably going to be fine.
So what is this book? Is it about a specific turtle, or is this a new character or something else?
You're wondering who the Last Ronin is, right? That's
maybe that's a spoiler. I don't know.
That
I feel
is,
like the cover.
Okay. That is sort of an unfolding mystery that gets addressed, but I don't want to talk about that because that is kind of really what drives the plot initially. Okay. So that is a mystery you're just going to have to find out. I think people will be surprised. I was definitely surprised when I found out who it was. So
wait, so we already know who it is in issue 2?
Well, no, I think I know who it is. No, by issue 2. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, did they tell us? Like, I was like, if it's a mystery thing, they're showing their hand early, which I don't mind. Maybe it's like a Knives Out thing. But
it's only 5 issues, right? So it's not like this is being stretched out forever, right? The story plot does feel like it is kind of borrowing from the Frank Miller playbook of let's take a well-known character, let's put them in a gritty authoritarian future, and let's ratchet up the age rating from PG-13 to R. Like, it does feel like it took a page from that playbook, but it doesn't feel gratuitous.
Okay.
It doesn't feel like, oh my God, Raphael just chopped off that guy's head because he just does not care anymore. Like,
so you're saying it's Raphael?
No, I'm not. And I'm not just trying to save myself here. It's not Raphael.
I know. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
So yeah, it doesn't suffer from like HBO's season 1 syndrome of we can do anything here, and so we're gonna do sex and violence up front until we get bored with it.
Get the turtles just completely nude in the first issue.
Right. Yeah. They're completely nude now, except that's basically what they were before, except for wearing a belt and a bandana. They were basically nude.
Bandanas
they're
are
wearing
off.
shells. I mean, you guys don't know anything about turtles.
No, Rene. No, I don't like that. I don't like that imagery.
Also, Raphael very clearly wears a trench coat.
Oh, that's true. And a fedora.
Raphael's walking around the streets of New York just saying "milady" like over and over, but with a gritty voice, "milady."
Raphael has an intense Reddit presence, but it's not a good one.
My brother and I always say the constant thing that he says from the first Turtles movie when he runs into Casey Jones. Not like that, they don't. Not from you.
Oh my God. So Nick, what are your thoughts on this book? Is it any good? Is it worth reading?
Yeah, it's good. It's really good. Like, initially you do start to worry that it is going to borrow a little too much from the Frank Miller, like, vengeance, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But it feels really well thought out. The world building is fantastic. There is an entire issue which you can buy. And I know sometimes these sort of like side issue, director's cut issue, black and white issues, people are like, roll of the eyes. Okay, someone's trying to make an extra buck. But
right, it's IDW, so yes.
Yeah, exactly. So that is probably what's happening. I just fell for it a little bit more than everyone else. There's an issue, I think it's called the Last Ronin design doc or something like this, and it is all of the world building documents with all of Eastman's notes, and it's a ton of Kevin Eastman sketches. And if you're into that stuff, I think you'll dig it. Bottom line, if you like Kevin Eastman art, Eastman is actually handling the flashback sequences on this book, and it's so good. It's so fantastic. It's a nice touch. It's almost like when you see Jeff Lemire sort of like doing the art within the art of a book, and you're like, oh, this is really cool and fitting.
Yeah.
And if you know very little about Turtles, you can jump into this. You'll have a good time. It's fantastic.
Turtles in general, or the Ninja Turtles?
Both. Why not both?
To quote a famous internet video, look, Rene, I like turtles. Okay.
Oh,
Rene, what have you been reading?
I read this. I actually saw this book on TikTok. So I decided.
I love this intro already.
Nick, listen. All right, some of the folks on TikTok are pretty good. I have to say that.
No. I'm not saying this won't be that. Like, whenever anybody intros it with "I saw this on TikTok," like I'm just like, I have no idea where this is going. I'm excited, so I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rene.
Like I was saying, TikTok, and it's called "Let This Grieving Soul Retire," Volume 1. Story and art by Rai Hibino, and it's based off of a light novel. So the original story is by Tsukikage, and the character design is by someone named Chico, I think. So I saw this on TikTok, and it just kind of seemed really funny. It's about like this hero who isn't actually that good of a hero, but all of his friends are like essentially like the best heroes in the world. And like it was their childhood goal to become really good heroes, and he decided that he was going to retire like halfway through that thing, and they went, nah, that's stupid, you should be the leader of our guild. And he's like, what?
Sure.
He's like, that's a terrible idea. But they basically,
so when you say not good, you mean inept, right? Not evil. You mean that when you say he's not good, you mean that he's just
he has
inept.
No talents for everything. He has no talents for anything. Okay. He's very like he probably shouldn't be doing this. He should probably be doing like
a natural leader.
He should be a secretary or something.
It's a danger
like that.
To him and others, is what you're saying.
Yeah, he's like it's very clear that there's like I'm should be third string. Y'all are on first string. Maybe I should actually just be the towel boy type thing.
I see.
Maybe I just have a big sign on the sidelines that says "Go Team," that type of thing. Okay. But instead, all of his friends are like, "No, I believe in you. I think you should be the leader of our guild or whatever." And so he's the leader of the guild, and he's sort of like he's running into all these other people who also just because he's the leader of the guild, and that he's been around all these really strong people, there's been a lot of fanfare and legends that have been all about it. And he's constantly like, yeah, all that stuff's not true. I'm actually a coward, and I want to throw up all the time. I just want to not do this job. And
interesting.
So it's kind of funny. It's a little weird. No, that's literally it. Every single time you're like, wait, no, that secret, type thing that happens in it. It's like, no, they're really the chosen one. He's like, no, I'm really out of depth, but things just kind of keep working out for one reason or another. But I'm scared all the time. And literally one of his quirks is that he wants to throw up all the time.
So there's no to quote Parappa the Rapper, I know, I gotta believe moment. That's not a
No. He also constantly, he keeps doing this thing where he sends people out to go do jobs because he doesn't want to do them. And then it turns out that the job he's picked for them ends up being way harder than it's supposed to be. And so the first volume ends up with his one of the people that's in a side guild or whatever that's under his guild. She calls him master and stuff and all that. but she's like she has to lead a party to go do a mission, and so she tells them, she's like, look, all of you need to write your wills because we could die on this.
So is this like you said guild? Is this like a fantasy themed thing or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a fantasy adventurer thing. So yeah,
interesting.
It's kind of funny. I'm still like on the fence about it. Like you're always kind of worried about where. Well, me specifically, I'm always worried about where TikTok recommendations are going to take me.
Sure, sure, that's fair.
So I mean, we'll see. Okay. What about you, Mike?
I've read a couple books this week. I read I Hate This Place #1. This is my pick of the week last week by Kyle Starks. Pencils and inks by Artyom Topolin. Colors by Lee Lowridge. Letters by Pat Purcell. I was hoping, I think I said this last week, I was hoping for like a good comedy romp with this first issue with like some horror elements, and it turns out that this is actually like just a straight up over the top horror book. Not in a way that's I didn't feel like it was a creepy book. I felt like it's a very aware of itself type of story without saying that it knows that it's a horror story. Like Kyle Starks and his group of creators gives us this like over the top horror book that feels like an 80s horror action movie that kind of knows how ridiculous it's being. Like there's a big old bag of guns and eye bulging cows and cliched to deaths. We're going to make a brand new life here as these characters show up to this clearly haunted house that has like all the bad trappings that you would expect from a place that's got monsters and ghosts and a big bad and, you know, killer psychos on the loose as well as aliens. Like this book has all of the things that you would expect to go into a horror movie. And yet it feels almost like a cabin in the woods style look at a story, but without being super meta about itself. Like I said, it screams classic dumb horror. Starks wrote in the back of the issue that he wanted to include UFOs, a haunted house, a big unknown power, plus a deranged killer, which to me feels like a lot to put into one single comic. And yet this first issue included all of that and nothing really felt out of place. The book's a little clunky, but I feel like that clunkiness is everything that you would expect out of an 80s movie. I don't think that that's Kyle Starks writing a bad comic. I think it's him just saying, and cut to, this person literally pulls out a huge gym bag full of guns. Like, why wouldn't they, right? We need to set up all of the Chekhov's everything in order for it to play out later in the book. So I do appreciate like how intense it was without trying to stray too deep into comedy. Like there were bits that I found funny, but they didn't feel like jokes. And when it's someone like Kyle Starks writing a comic, I think this guy is solid enough of a writer to know how to write bits like that are funny without being jokes themselves. Because we know that Kyle Starks, if you've read any of his other work, everyone go read the 6 Sidekicks of Trigger Keaton. It's one of the funniest comics to come out in the last couple of years. You know that he can write a funny story. And yet he wanted to do a horror comic, but this doesn't feel like the plot. It doesn't feel like the plot. It doesn't feel like anything that Cullen Bunn has written in the last 5 years, you know, like over the top, very scary kind of stuff. So I'm interested to see where this book goes. I think the thing I'm trying to keep in mind is that there's like nothing wrong with this dumb horror type fun if you don't think about it too much. Like, why are there aliens and some big sort of eldritch horror and all of these other things? Like, how can you take it too serious when every single type of horror trope is included in a comic? So I'm really excited to see where Starks takes this book. The first issue felt fun, but I feel like if it doesn't keep pace with being both a horror book and over the top, it's going to fall apart really fast. So yeah, I'm digging this book. And Artyom Topolin's art is really, really solid. Like, I feel like the subtlety from their work in Ice Cream Man Quarantine Comics is lost a bit, but I think that was a very unique comic to try to like show off subtlety and some of the intricacies of their art. This book instead exchanges that subtlety for massive one-page displays of like them really showing off and saying, hey, Lee Lowridge, I challenge you to do this page, and its colors really, really smartly, and they deliver every single time. The last page in this book especially is just like really cool. There's nothing like fantastical or overly intricate about it, but just I think the way that it was delivered hits home like the tone and the future of this book, where there's a mystery and then there's like aliens and super killers and all this other stuff all at once. So I'm excited to see where this book goes and what this creative team is capable of in the future. But yeah, I Hate This Place #1, which I think Danny in our Discord had a copy of the non-censored version, which I think is called Fuck This Place #1. Which I like, because it's like, if you go to a place like this, I think Kyle Stark says in the back in his like afterwards, that if you saw a place like this, you too would be screaming, yeah, fuck this place, as soon as you showed up. So I really like that. I think this book was solid, but I'm worried that it might not be able to keep itself together as the series goes on. So I'm hesitantly optimistic, I guess.
Is it a miniseries or is it an ongoing?
As far as I know, it's ongoing, but I didn't really look too much further than that. I just saw Kyle Starks. I clicked pre-order and then I got it. So not really thinking about it. I'm just ready to read it.
I was going to say, like, it's hard to imagine books with that much content and that much energy, like, pacing well forever. But then again,
right.
You know, I keep reading, you know, extravagant tales of horrible vengeance by Rick Remender, and that's still
the righteous thirst for vengeance.
Whatever. I don't care.
Anyways, Nick, did you read anything else you want to talk about?
Clearly not that Rick Remender book. Sure. I did read Spy X Family Volume 1, a book that probably no one on this show has absolutely ever heard of, except I think it probably gets brought up 7 or 8 times a week by 3 or 4 different people. So you've probably never heard of it. This one's been on my radar for a while, just because it gets talked about so much, and sort of joke/action manga are something I'm always kind of interested to at least give a try. This book is written and drawn by Tetsuya Endo. And I think, as most people know, you know, the basic premise is that you have this spy who's tasked with getting close to this target, who endangers the truce between the East and West fictional nations of the book. The target is a huge recluse, and the only way to get close to him are through the only real public events that he attends, which are those at the private school that his son goes to. So, of course, the spy needs to, you know, get married, have a child, enroll the kid at the school, attend the events, and everything that goes along with that, basically. And, of course, he isn't really interested in having to put up with kids and have a wife, but he, you know, decides that he's going to have to find a way to make that work. It's got a great sense of humor to it, but also just a fantastic art style. I don't know, like, frequently with a lot of these books, like, you start to deal with issues of, you know, same face problems, and everybody looks really very distinct and different here, so you don't end up going like, oh gosh, who is this character again? And just the level of detail here is just fantastic. Like, the panel where I think his name is Lloyd, but it's spelled L-O-I-D, which is a very interesting spelling of Lloyd, is about to spring over the table to, like, punch one of the evaluators at his daughter's school interview in the face. There's a panel where he's, like, springing over the desk to punch him, and it just looks great. It's absolutely fantastic. I do find it a little weird that his cover identity, he goes with the last name of Forger, which is a little weird. I mean, why don't you just go as, like, Jeff Arsonist at that point or something like that? You know, I don't know. Interesting choice. You could say, well, Nick, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know. I assume that the translation was adapted accurately enough that was what was initially intended. So,
I think you got to let some things go.
Yeah.
Anya's favorite TV show is called Bond Man. I mean, there's some things you just gotta take and just be like, all right, yeah, that's what's happening, and just run with it.
Yeah. It's great. The interview process, which is what a lot of this trade, it's mostly him getting the family together, and then the interview process is it's pretty funny. Like, he's doing practice interviews with his daughter, who I forgot to mention. Gosh, this is such a huge part of it. His daughter, which he gets from an orphanage, turns out to be a psychic, have psychic powers, and his wife ends up to be an assassin, except Lloyd knows here we go, here's the fun part. Lloyd knows that his daughter is psychic, and the daughter knows that both of them have the roles that they each respectively have, but the wife doesn't know that the daughter is psychic, and the husband and wife are not aware of what the other one does.
Actually, Lloyd does not know that Anya's psychic. He just thinks she's very perceptive.
Wait, is that...
This is where
that's
manga
in the story.
becomes insane, right? It's like intentionally convoluted and wild to add to the hilarity, right?
Yeah.
Dude, you haven't even met the dog yet, so I mean, it's going to get way more crazy.
But yeah, they're practicing interviews with the daughter, and Lloyd is like, so Anya, what do you do when you aren't in school? Like the interview questions that you would get from these proctors. And she goes, well, since Papa leaves me home alone, I watch TV and feel sad. And I'm like, I get that. That's fair. Oh my god,
Nick's finding a lot of connection with this character.
Yeah, like I think if you were a latchkey kid, like this book might connect with you.
I see.
I'm just kidding, and I'm not saying. I mean, my parents were both helicopter parents. It's not a I had the opposite problem.
We'll get into that in the second half of the show.
Yeah. The other thing I just want to highlight is honestly the lettering and word art in this book is fantastic. And I don't know if this is just something that happens in manga a lot, although I did notice it in another book, which I'll talk about later. So maybe it's more of a manga thing than I was aware of. But this book likes to use these little emojis of characters to indicate when someone is speaking off screen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really great. Again, maybe manga's been doing this forever and it's just not in some of the books I read, but I think that is genius and perfect and just adds this level of like narrative clarity when you're reading a book, especially like a dialogue heavy book. And of course with manga not being able to like rely or not wanting to do the massive a lot of like Western comics, right? They have an obsession with the huge like 2-panel spread where it's just dozens of conversation bubbles just all over the place. And it's like, what the fuck is this shit? Manga, at least with these books, like you're dealing with simple 5-6 panel pages. And it's like, well, how do you parse out, the dialogue? And so doing the emoji little characters is just, that's great. I think that's fantastic. I also really love, the book uses, they look like thought bubbles, but they don't have the trailing bubbles. So it's just a big bubble, but then it looks like a sun because they've got all these little lines jutting out from it.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I guess, is like a internal monologue bubble.
Man, Nick, there's so much more complexity to manga. I think that like we probably should do an entire episode on this, honestly, because I feel like that American comics for the most part are pretty simple in comparison. Like when you look at the range of shorthand that is built into these manga volumes and like for this specific reason, like little chibi characters or little like the way that different symbols on the word bubbles themselves mean different things as to what's happening. It's very, very smart. And like we lean on captions very much in the West. I think manga, they try to depict emotion and other things way better in ways in much smarter ways. That makes it, I don't know, feel like there's a more advanced culture when it comes to like comic book literacy over in Japan and Korea and in China and stuff like that. Just totally feel that.
Yeah, so it's as like an internal monologue thing, it's great, and you don't have this stupid design issue of like having to create like a trail of thought bubbles to clutter the page. Just great. I think it's such an efficient way to do more with less space. And so full credit to Rene Mappa, who does the lettering and touch-up art for that book, because for a comedy book, flow and narrative are so important, and just being able to get it right the first time is just, really impressed with that. Just the little things. I'm still picking this stuff up, so just maybe I'll be jaded and not easily impressed and have some beer with everything. But for now, everything is new and bright and wonderful. And
Look at what we've done, Rene. We've created a monster out of Nick.
Yeah.
I regret nothing.
What else have you been reading, Rene?
Books, Mike. Lots and lots of books.
All right, well then we're going to take a quick break.
Okay. So I actually finally read a Western comic that I've been meaning to read for a while, and that is Thor, Goddess of Thunder, Volume 1. It's written by Jason Aaron with art by Russell Dodderman and Jorge Molina, with coloring by Matthew Wilson. And then also Jorge Molina also did coloring on the issue that he did, at least for this first volume. And then lettering by VC's Joe Sabino. This book was good. It was good. I enjoyed it, like I knew I would. I do enjoy seeing Malekith as sort of the unhinged creature that he is. You know, he's just, you're like, you're crazy. You make me uncomfortable.
What is Malekith?
He's the king of the Dark Elves.
Okay.
Is this the first like Jane Thor, or is this another like subsequent volume?
It's the first Jane Foster Thor. So we actually don't even know that she's Jane Foster at this point.
Oh, like, sorry, spoilers for a really old comic, I guess.
Yeah, throughout the whole volume, they're like, "Who is this? She's stolen Thor's hammer." They're like, "Lady Thor? What?" Lots of that. Also, there's someone goes, "Not even like Lady Thunderstrike," and I was like, "Hey, Thunderstrike, callback." Mm-hmm. There's a lot of good and bad to like about this book. Like there's a lot of really fun things going on. And I really enjoyed it all the way through. The only thing I didn't really like is like, you know, sort of seeing Odin being an old fool and stuck in his ways. And, you know, a lot of the Asgardians kind of just being very like trying to move backwards, which like will happen, you know, in comics. Like, for me, for reading Thor, anything Thor, the J. Michael Straczynski books will always stick out in my mind because they were just so dang good, and they had so much character development. And like that was after like the huge loss, like they were dead and came back, and you know there was so much that happened in that series that it feels like anything after that feels like it's taking a huge like step back. And this also kind of undoes a couple things from Fear Itself, which I really didn't enjoy. Fear Itself was actually kind of the book that made me stop reading Western books altogether.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
There was a huge period of time where I stopped buying Western comics. And I really only read manga.
To be fair, Rene, I don't think most people came away from Fear Itself loving it. So I don't know if that helps, but I don't know if people quite came away with the hard line stance that you took following reading the book.
Well, I love it. No, that's right.
I can't blame it entirely on Fear Itself, but what happened was I was reading Fear Itself, I didn't like it, and then I was also moving, so I had to go to my local comic book shop and be like, "Hey, I'm moving, so I'm not going to be buying my comics from here anymore." So I literally stopped. I moved, and then I just didn't become I didn't go to another local comic book store, and I was just like, well, a lot of things are changing in DC. Fear Itself was terrible.
Yeah. You know what?
It was like
totally understandable.
And so I was just like, it was just this huge changing point in my life. And then I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to keep reading the manga that I like. And I also didn't even pick up manga for about a year, which is why when I got back into it, I bought 40 manga in a year.
Nice.
So, but again, to get back to my point was, there's a lot to like about this Thor. I do want to keep reading it, but like, there's always just that kind of thing where it's like, oh, even though we had all this growth for these characters, you know, that was a different writer. That was 10 years ago. You know, we're always going to take either a half step back with every, you know, couple steps forward that we take, just because, you know, the characters need to follow this cycle. You know, it is what it is. But regardless of that, I still had a fun time. I love what Jason Aaron did in this series, and I want to keep reading it. And, you know, if I finish Goddess of Thunder, we'll see if I want to keep reading what happens with Thor next. But at the time being, I'm like, yeah, Thor's just going to become worthy again. Somehow he's going to regrow his arm, whatever.
Wait, he's missing an arm?
Yeah, he gets his arm cut off in the first fucking issue.
Oh.
Before we get too deep into that, I'm just gonna take over here because I have one more book I want to talk about, and that is X-Men Red #2. This is the Al Ewing book with pencils and arts by Stefano Caselli, colors by Federico Blee, letters by VC's Corey Petit. Ultimately, if you are not reading this X-Men like Destiny of X thing. I'm so sorry for you, because I'm gonna continue to talk about X-Men on this show. And if you have any thoughts on it, or you have any questions, let me know. But this book is interesting. I read a bunch of the X books that came out this week, and this is the only one that I thought was really worth talking about. The reason I like this book the most is because it feels like I'm reading a conspiracy theory as it's happening in real time. Because this book is about conspiracy that Agent Brand has hatching, and I'm not going to say any more than that she has hatching in the X-Men universe, and you get to see her actually adding layers to it to make things more complex by pulling weird characters into the story and making them make mistakes intentionally and all this stuff. It's a really, really fun book, and I feel like only a handful of writers could pull something off like this and have it not feel like super forced. But I think Ewing's writing is like really, really subtle in the way that he plays Brand's character in what she's doing versus what she's writing to people, because of course it's an X-Men book, so every single fucking issue has a page of prose in it. Not that like that's a bad thing, because like I get it, but also like it totally destroys the flow of a comic book. So I don't know, it's an interesting book, and I think like it's definitely a solid pick. And I love seeing Storm being like the most badass character ever. I just wish there was more of her in each issue. So hoping that see Danny in the chat saying that he skips the prose. The prose is crucial in this book. If you skip it,
is it literally in the middle of the book, or is it front end or back ended?
It's literally in the middle, like just randomly a whole page is just prose. There's probably a lot to be said about this. I have a feeling that like I could probably do a deep dive on all of the House of X like an era of X-Men books from start to current, and like do a breakdown as to like which books actually use the prose properly and which ones didn't. And spoilers, the majority of them didn't use it well. But yeah, this issue was pretty good, and I don't know, I like X-Men Red, I like Al Ewing's writing, so I'm very excited to see where this book goes.
I was gonna say, Mike, that sounds like TikTok content to me.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah, I'm gonna become a professional TikToker and get in the middle of X, Twitter, and TikTok and just have everyone hate me in the world because I'm not talking about 90s X-Men. So anyways, we're going to take a quick break, I think. And when we come back, we're going to talk about, I guess we're changing our format a little bit for episodes like this. We're going to talk about our number one book that we read, and then we're going to jump into the books that are on the top of our pile. So we'll be back to finish things up in just a minute. We're back. This week on I Read Comic Books. I don't know, we're changing up the way that we do things on the show, trying to, just add some spice to life. So we're talking about our number one book that we read recently. And I guess I'm just going to pitch things right over to Rene. What was the best thing you read recently that you want to talk about here on the show?
So I actually reread most of a series this week because I was just scrolling through anime Twitter, as you do. And I saw some clips from a wonderful series called Kuroko's Basketball, or nice. Kuroko no Basket, as it's known in Japan, which is about high school basketball in Japan, obviously.
I mean, not obviously. I don't know what Kuroko means. I don't know what basketball
Kuroko's
means.
The main character's name.
Okay. I'm just here to be mean to you, Rene. I'm sorry.
But I was watching some clips of it. So I originally watched this series as an anime because it was on Crunchyroll, and it was blowing up when I originally watched it. And so I had actually never read the manga other than like a chapter or two. So I was watching a clip from the show, then I started rewatching the show, and then I was just like, for kicks and giggles, I decided to rewatch the movie that came out. And then I was just like, you know what? The anime's taking too long. This is too much of a process. So I decided to jump at the point that I was at in the anime from my rewatch, and then just read all the way to the end of the series. So that was like chapters 120 to 275. And because I really love this series. It's all about like, just the love of sport and like teamwork, and then also what it's like to really kind of go against like, you know, your friends, but also rivals. I'm like, I really don't like basketball, but I really like Kuroko's basketball.
Is this going to turn into another one of Rene's fights against the 100 chapter daily limit? Because it sounds like...
No. Actually, luckily, I didn't run into it. I paced myself really well, so I didn't actually hit that.
Okay, thank God.
I also took breaks and read some series that were on my tablet, and then I also read some webcomics to actually kind of divert from just trying to power through Kuroko's basketball so I wouldn't hit the 100 chapter limit on a day.
I see. Proud of you.
Thank you.
Well, I've actually read the first volume of this. I was just being a shit earlier. I have read the first volume of Kuroko's basketball, and I really liked it. And then someone introduced me to Haikyuu, and I read most of that instead.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I like Haikyuu more than Kuroko's basketball, but I still also like Kuroko's basketball. Also, I forgot to mention story and art by Tadatoshi Fujimaki and his assistants. And I love actually Tadatoshi Fujimaki. His other series, Robot Laser Beam, was one of my favorites that got canceled way too soon, which was about golf, which I also don't care about. I don't care about golf, but
then I assume you don't play Go all the time, but you're a huge fan of the book that I can't think of the title.
Actually, I got really into Go after reading Hikaru no Go, and actually me and my best friend in high school, we would play online Go, and we bought like a magnetic Go board and played each other all the time. He downloaded a Go game on Xbox. And I actually do Joseki puzzles on my phone.
Okay, so the absolute reverse actually happened.
Yeah.
No, it's not reversey. It's Go, Nick.
Sorry.
Okay. Anyways,
like Go, and now we're going to collect $200.
Rene, I'm glad that you brought this book back to my attention, at least, because I have been meaning to go back and read this because I really liked the first volume. But maybe I should finish Haikyuu. Well, here's my order. Is probably what's going to happen. I'm going to finish Jujutsu Kaisen, then finish Haikyuu, then finish Claymore, then I'll get to Kuroko's basketball.
Like, Jujutsu Kaisen's a weekly. You can't finish it.
Well,
you can only catch up.
I want to get caught up, and I just can't read more than 2 or 3 chapters at a time because it's so boring. So
that's why I dropped that book.
Right, exactly. So interesting.
Those are interesting interesting thoughts to hold concurrently of, I'm trying to power my way through this. It's hard because it's boring.
Yeah.
That's like the big book too right now. Like Jujutsu Kaisen's everywhere.
Guys, I've got to get current on this book. I hate it so much. I hate it, but I gotta.
Speaking of, let's talk about your number one read that you had, Nick.
What a good segue. Thank you. That was a masterful segue.
Mm-hmm.
Hello there.
Go ahead.
One masterful segue deserves a terrible one. So I want to talk about a book that is not so much number one in quality, but number one in priority, because I need to warn other people. This is me providing my oft-requested public service announcement that you do not need to, nor should you want to, read Star Wars Obi-Wan #1, a miniseries that recently began. First off, you don't need to call it Star Wars Obi-Wan. There aren't 2 Obi-Wans in my life, and I'm not likely to confuse this one with sorry, I was thinking of the Obi-Wan on my, pickup basketball team. No, there's just one for me, so you don't need that. I suppose they just do it so alphabetically all the Star Wars books get lumped together so that the Star Wars junkies can just buy everything at once, like I do. And then you read books like this. So, look, this is just absolutely the worst thing I've ever read by Christopher Cantwell.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow, that's coming in hard here.
Yeah, dude.
I mean, and honestly, I'll just try to be positive about that and say that everything else has been great, right? Like, honestly, everything else by him has been really, really wonderfully solid. And so this just has to stack up against that. And it doesn't. The book just sort of has that unmistakable odor of cash grab from the moment it was kind of announced. And it was like, okay, like we're trying to time something with the miniseries. Like, I get it. Tie-ins exist. They've been a part of mass media and culture forever. That's fine. If only I had an elderly, hooded, Force-sensitive hermit to talk me out of buying this book with a wave of his hand and a hypnotic assurance that this wasn't the issue I was looking for. So that was definitely not scripted, everyone. I didn't workshop that for a while. You know that. So the book, and I suspect all the issues that follow, sort of are prefaced with Obi-Wan sitting down to jot in his diary. He's emo. And just while he just sort of just dinks around on the planet of Tatooine, the planet that I misspelled 13 or 14 times while trying to write this and never managed to spell it correctly. And maybe the comic should have been about that. Like if he was just sitting down with his Lisa Frank diary and he's like, "Dear diary," and then it's got like the monologue from the end of Doogie Howser episodes where he sits down in front of the computer to just write about his day. Like maybe it should have been that, but it's not. I would have liked that. And honestly,
what is Lisa Frank?
Yeah, Lisa
Listen,
Frank.
Nick, what is this book about, and why did you not like it?
Yeah.
What is happening?
So, it's hard to tackle everything that's wrong with this book, all right? And I will try to get around it. So let's just say this. The beginning part of him when he's old and he's just putzing around Tatooine is great, and I like that. And it's probably the best part. The art by Ario Anindito in this part is it's moody and it's stark and it's desolate and it's great.
Okay.
And if the remaining 2/3 of the book were just him going around like being alone and like, I don't know, buying droids from Jawas or something, maybe I would have liked that. Maybe I just want to be sad. Maybe that's it. But instead, the rest of the book is him, like I said, going through his diary and recalling a chapter in his life. The first chapter is about when he was a youngling, and basically a friend of his, her dad, gets in trouble, and he follows her into the lower levels of Coruscant to try to figure out what's going on with her dad. And of course, as most people know, the lower levels of Coruscant are dangerous, blah, blah, blah.
Well, okay. Without giving a full summary of every page that happened in the book.
Yeah.
What made you not like this?
That's the issue. Okay. Coruscant bad. Like, that's it. And I mean, mathematically, the book just has its back up against the wall because you've only got 22 pages. Your opening credits and your old Obi-Wan sequence eat up 7 or 8 of those pages, and you're left with like 14 pages to tell a very small story. And if you're thinking, Nick, well, maybe the story continues in the next issue, it's not going to. Like, Obi-Wan goes, anyway, at the end, Obi-Wan's like, anyway, that was a moment in my life, and I never saw those people again, and I hope they're still alive, and that's it. That's it. And so you get 14 pages to tell a story that says, kids got in trouble in Coruscant, and that's it. And at the end, I thought to myself, well, maybe the redeeming factor of this book is that in the next chapter, these characters from early on in his life will end up being interwoven into other points in his life, right? Like, these characters are going to find each other again at a point when maybe he's a Jedi Knight or something, and that'll be the narrative through line, right? Like, I gave the book the benefit of a doubt because I thought maybe that's where they were trying to go.
Okay.
But then Obi-Wan's like, yeah, I never saw these people again. That's weird. Anyway, done with my diary. and next month I'll be a Jedi Knight, and it'll be me with Qui-Gon.
Okay. So does it just feel like weird, lazy library? I mean, like, I feel like
it's such a short story. It's like nothing happens. Nothing happens.
Danny in the chat is very upset about all of this. So I'm interested to know, maybe if you come back to this after 5 issues, assuming you continue to read.
Sorry, I just read Danny. Nick read it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like, it'd be interesting to see, but I mean, again, I feel like your assessment early on was this is a cash grab to try to pair something up with the TV show. Sounds 100% on brand for Disney.
Yeah, it feels very much like this wasn't what you wanted it to be, and like therefore it's just very easy to attack it.
I mean, like, this doesn't feel, first off, this doesn't feel like a Christopher Cantwell book to me. It really doesn't. Okay. It really, really doesn't. And I say this a lot, and I think people throw this around and they don't mean it. I do mean it when I say I would love to be proven wrong. Like, Christopher Cantwell is a smart dude. He really is. And that's what makes this book ever more disappointing to me, is that it doesn't feel like him. It really feels like if you would have just crossed out the writer line in this book, let me read the book, and asked me at the end who wrote this book, I would have never attached him to this book.
Gotcha.
Period. The art is just it's weirdly all over the place, and maybe that's a testament to Anindito trying to channel a brighter, different aesthetic for a younger Obi-Wan narrative set on Coruscant, as opposed to an older Obi-Wan narrative set on Tatooine. But that's disappointing too, because the older Obi-Wan shit looks great. It really does. So it feels like there's a real missed opportunity here. Yeah, I just again, I would love to be proven wrong with this book, but as the number one issue, even more so, right? As an issue that's supposed to hook me, it doesn't. Like,
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. I mean, I know I'm not going to prove you wrong, because I'm just no longer buying Star Wars comic books, because I don't need to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Renee's making the right choice out of all of us, and by not participating at all. Well, Nick, I feel like I'm gonna grab this when it's collected and it goes on sale for $2 on digitally. So maybe we'll have to revisit this sometime in the future. But
look, check in with me next month. You know how I am. I'm a moron. I will be buying number 2 and just being like, oh God, why didn't anyone tell me about issue number 1?
Right. But for the sake of all of our time, we're going to move on. Because I have one more book I want to talk about. And that is, I read The Ghost of You by Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips, and Jacob Phillips. This is the latest installment in the Reckless series. I think Paul talked about this pretty recently. I really dig this book. If you haven't been reading the Reckless series of graphic novels, I think if you're looking for something that is out there, that is very different than what you're going to probably find on the shelves from the big two, like, this is definitely one of those books, and that's really going to work. And the fact that they're pretty standalone for the most part, with a little bit of understanding, is pretty good. But it's worth reading all 4 of them. And we had a person on our Discord for it that really loved this book. I wanted to read it yesterday strictly because they had said that it was such a solid read, and 100% agree with them. 138 pages of a comic that makes you feel like you've barely started the story before it's over. And I say that in the best way. Like, I didn't realize that the book was almost done until I got to the last dozen pages. And I really like the way that Brubaker and Phillips take this side character in Anna Keller, who is like Ethan Reckless's partner, right? So the whole series is named after Reckless, Ethan Reckless, but Anna Keller is his cohort that helps him with all of the jobs that he does, as he helps people solve crimes and solve mysteries and stuff. And I'm making this book sound a lot more goofy than it probably is, because the Reckless books are very much about like an 80s era noir type of story that's about crime and interesting weird things that are happening in the world of the 80s. And Anna is just there. She's constantly helping Ethan in what he's doing in the previous 3 installments, but in this one, we really get a focus on her as she goes out and does a job while Ethan's off and away, which will be the next OGN in the series coming out later this year, which is a mind fuck that we have 2 of these volumes, or 2 of these OGNs coming out this year.
It's wild.
But yeah, like reading this story about Anna, where we get to see her personal life weave in with the investigative thing that she's trying to solve, where a counterpart to our world's Elvira, aka Elvina, or Evelina, excuse me, in the story of the Reckless books. She buys this old house in old Hollywood that's supposedly haunted. It's got like underground tunnels and different things, and like people were murdered in it back in the 60s. And so there's this kind of question of, is this going to be spooky? Is it not? And I really like the way that Brubaker shows Anna being pretty scared, but also fearless at the same time, in this, like, she's just like a young woman and she's going into all of these extremely dangerous situations. And she's like, yeah, fuck this. Like, what is someone going to do? Kill me? Is kind of like the best mentality. The thing that I really loved about this OGN, though, is that it feels like Sean Phillips really, really, really loves drawing Anna as a character. She's got this tight-lipped, cynical, questioning face that they do a lot of really interesting close-ups on, that I just love. Like, whenever we would get a reaction out of a character, I think everyone who's ever read a Sean Phillips book knows what a Sean Phillips guy looks like. And to see this character who doesn't look like any of the women that Sean Phillips has drawn in the past, and he truly seems to love drawing her in just slight variations on her tight-lipped face, that she shows very often. It's right on the cover of this volume. It's really, really great. And the last thing I'll say about this book is I want to give a major shout out to Jacob Phillips on this, who does colors. His work seems to get better and better and better with every subsequent volume or original graphic novel in this series. And I know he's been working with Brubaker and his dad, Sean Phillips, for a while now on comics, but man, this guy's a talent. And to look over and see the other book that he's doing, Newburn, with Chip Zdarsky, is unbelievable as well. But his color work in this book is amazing. Especially there's a lot of scenes that involve flashlights in this book. And the way that he does this extreme washing out of color instead of just lightening the colors in the scene, I think is really unique. And it's a very much a Jacob Phillips type of coloring. He does this smattering of colors and that almost looks like brushwork, but it's not. It's clearly digital brushwork that I feel is only a Jacob Phillips thing. If you ever read his book that he did with Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips called All My Heroes Have Been Junkies, I think is what it was, or My Heroes Have Always Been Junkies. Can't remember what it's called.
Right, yeah. Whatever it is. Junkies are involved, yeah.
Yeah, he does this really interesting thing with the neons in that color that make them feel almost chalky. And you can see that in a lot of his subsequent work. I think the My Heroes Have Always Been Junkies is more of an experimental color palette, whereas the later work that he's done with Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, and even in Newburn, is more traditional in the color palettes that they choose. But you can see some of that in this volume, and it adds a layer of uniqueness and specialness to this book that you're not going to find anywhere else. No one else is doing color work like this, and I really, really appreciate it. So shout outs to The Ghost in You, because that book fucking rules, and thank you for reminding me to sit down and actually read this. So
you're telling me Jacob Phillips is doing another book in addition to this Texas Blood, or is it that Texas Blood? This Texas Blood?
Yeah, he's doing Newburn with Chip Zdarsky.
Oh my god,
he's doing all pencils, inks, and colors, if I'm not mistaken.
Holy cow.
Hey, yeah. Mike.
What's up?
While you were reading The Ghost in You, were you listening to The Ghost of You by My Chemical Romance?
Absolutely not. Let's move on.
Missed opportunity. That's all I'm saying.
Given the new My Chemical Romance song that was dropped, I should have been, right? This is a definite missed opportunity for me. But Let's talk about comics that we're excited for. Let's talk about comics that are coming up that we're looking forward to, or that we're going to be reading next. Comic books that are on the top of our pile. So let's just bounce right back over to you, Rene. What are you looking forward to reading next?
I'm looking forward to actually just continuing to read. I read the chapter already for today, so I'm looking forward to next week's chapter. But Sakamoto Days, chapter 72, with story and art by Yuto Suzuki and his assistants. I absolutely love this book. If you're not reading it, you've messed up somewhere. You need to correct that immediately. Read this book. Sakamoto Days is hilarious, and then also the art and the action is phenomenal. I cannot give anything but praise to this book. I've had a wonderful time just the entire time that I've read it. It also passes the 50 chapter test, so there's plenty to read. Yeah, absolutely 100% recommend Sakamoto Days.
What is this book?
It's a manga.
Okay.
Oh man, he's killing it.
Yeah, I think I've made that joke twice this episode.
Yeah, I'm sure Mike loved it even more this time.
Yeah. What is this book about, I guess?
Sakamoto Days is about a retired assassin who now runs a corner store, kind of like a 7-Eleven type thing, or maybe it's like a small grocery shop type thing. But he runs it with his family, and he gave up being an assassin when he met his wife. And so he just left that entire world behind, and he's just trying to, live a comfortable life. And also he made a promise to his wife that he wouldn't kill anymore. So,
okay.
But he was the best assassin in the world. And it starts out with his former protege who used to look up to him coming to find him, because he's like, I was hired to kill you. And And then he ends up being like, I don't want to do that. I respect you, Mr. Sakamoto. And he ends up working for him at the grocery store.
Okay.
And he's a clairvoyant as well. So, he can, Sakamoto's like he doesn't talk much, but he thinks stuff all the time. So you get to actually see more of like what Sakamoto's like through the other assassins' mind reading of what's going on all the time.
Okay.
But then, there's lots of hijinks that sort of come around from people wanting to, kill Sakamoto. And then we also learn more about like the assassination world. And right now we're kind of in like a kind of like assassin school test type thing. And there's a reason behind it. It'd take too long to get into.
Of course there is.
Yeah. Trope's going to trope,
I know.
Whenever there's like a trial type thing or like, a tournament saga, like, I mean, let's go. That's what we live for.
Exactly. I mean, that's what brought Dragon Ball Super back to life, baby. So
dude, weeb's going to weeb. And you boys living that best weeb life right now with Sakamoto days. So
Love
if
it.
you want in on this, start reading that on that Shonen Jump app.
For sure.
And I think the first volume actually is now in physical print as well.
Yeah, that's how I read it. So yeah.
Well, Nick, what about you? What's on the top of your pile?
I mean, for me, I just want to just quick +1 Sakamoto days as someone who has barely read any of it. Definitely enjoying that book. So yeah, it helps that Sakamoto is the most unassuming looking assassin. That's a great book. For me, it's definitely Hellboy and the B.P.R.D, The Night of the Cyclops. This is written by Mike Mignola and Oliver Vatine. Art by Oliver Vatine, although he's French, so I'm sure it's Olivier, and then probably not Vatine. Letters by Clem Robbins, because it's a Mike Mignola book, so of course it's letters by Clem Robbins. So the plot here, according to the solicit, is, quote, just as he finishes up one job in Greece, Hellboy is detoured into another adventure by a goat. Join Hellboy in a strange hidden land of treachery and togas as he takes on the wrath of a jealous god.
Like a regular goat or like a mystical goat?
I don't know. The solicit was only one paragraph and did not take the time to elaborate. So I think the goat's on the cover and it just does look like a normal goat, but I don't know. You'll have to read it. Featuring the storytelling genius of Mike Mignola and Olivier Vatine, with art by Vatine and letters by Clem Robbins, the Mignolaverse meets classical mythology in this new one-shot. Apparently, for those unfamiliar with Vatine's work, Dark Horse published the complete edition of New York, Niourk, N-I-O-U-R-K, which is a post-apocalyptic graphic novel that he drew, and was a 2019 Eisner nominee for Best U.S. Edition of International Material. So clearly, It's got some nominations out there. Beyond that, I'm not very familiar with his work, but the art looks great. We've never, oddly enough, with all of the other pantheons that Hellboy has sort of clashed with, Greek has been surprisingly absent. So it was about time for him to, punch Zeus in the face or something with the red hand of doom. So, I mean, sounds perfect to me. If anything else, the cover looks fucking cool, and it's got Hellboy with wearing a toga and holding one of those old classical shields, but it's got the B.P.R.D logo on it, so it, looks great.
Can't wait to get that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun to see Mike Mignola bringing in all of these different artists for Hellboy and the B.P.R.D, especially moving outside of his usual stable of, Ben Stenbeck and Patrick Reynolds and the 3 or 4 other people that he usually tends to work with. So
I was surprised to not see Dave Stewart's name on this book. So
Dave's pissed. Dave's laying low this month. Dave must have used all his PTO that Mike Mignola hands out in Mignola bucks. I assume he probably.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, for me this week, that book sounds super fun. I'm sure that it's going to be a blast, because why not have Hellboy in the Greek mythology world? But I'm gonna move on real quick and get to my pick, but I guess before I do that, I should shout out some of our folks who are hanging out with us on the Discord today. Their picks for this week: Danny is reading Batman Fortress of Number 1, and Kev, welcome Kev from Patreon, is reading Silver Surfer Volume 3 number 50, going way back to read some old school Silver Surfer. It sounds like fun. Well, this week I will surprise all of you in saying that I did not pick Legion of X number 1. I was going to pick Legion of X. It's Simon Spurrier doing more Nightcrawler and more David Haller. I didn't pick it because I'm actually going to talk about a book that I'm reading next because I'm in the middle of it, and this is Steins Gate, the complete manga, written by Yomi Sarachi. If you don't know, if you didn't hear about this, this is an anime at one point. Actually was a video game first, and the manga is based on a 5 PB and Nitro Plus video game of the same name. It follows a series. The series follows the inventor / mad scientist / just kind of dummy named Rintaro Okabe, aka Rin, as he and his cohorts discover time travel via a cell phone and a microwave. The premise there sounds crazy, but it actually is like a really oddly serious book about like the ramifications of time travel. And as the story progresses, like Rin and the reader discover the problems of time travel, parallel universes, paradoxes that are kind of all based around a lot of like internet myths that came about in the early 2000s on like old message boards. One of the core bases of this story is that there was a guy who supposedly claimed that he was from the year 2036, and he talked about how time travel was invented in the year 2036 by the CERN company, or, the group that's out there in Europe. Of course, everything is changed with name differently. So CERN is spelled with an S in this book because they're trying not to like actually base it on real life things.
Wasn't this guy's name like John Tortor or something? Or
yeah, John Titor is the name of the guy in the
this
in
book
the manga.
is written just my God, buying this right now.
So this originally was like a series of visual novels, right? Visual novel video games. But I have super fond memories of watching the anime in college. Maybe not even college, because these games didn't, I don't know, whatever. At some point I watched this anime and I found it to be really, really compelling. And I saw that recently the soft cover collected edition of this whole manga came out. So I snagged it at the local comic shop. And I'm 4 chapters into reading this, and it is just as chaotic and exciting as the first time I read it. So many questions and so many unanswered things. I think that if I was reading this in a monthly book or a weekly like Shonen Jump style comic, I would be so put off by it. But being able to read it in its full collection, it's fucking awesome. Like every time you have a question, it immediately gets answered. That brings up more questions, and like this whole thing about how does time travel work. Each chapter unlocks another thing that makes you wonder how things work. They establish all these crazy ground rules that then the story has to follow in order to get to its final place that ties all the way back to chapter 1 of the series. I remember loving the anime and being confused, and reading the manga, I'm loving it, and I'm still just as confused. But the thing that I'm really excited about, though, is just to have this book at home, because this feels like a story I could go back and reread a couple times and still get a lot of enjoyment out of it, because it's intentionally told in like a really weird, cryptic way that takes manga tropes and makes them story beats that are actually like hidden things for what's happening with the time travel. So like a character being really weird and like having these like extremely odd mannerisms, or like only wanting to talk over text message, is actually like a guise for something that's happening in the story. But if you're reading a manga, you're like, oh, this is just a trope, a character's being weird. And it's like, there's actually a lot more there. And you don't find out what all those things mean until like the final couple of chapters. And even then you have a bunch of question marks. So yeah, I'm really excited to read through this. I didn't realize that there were 5 different visual novel video games that like tie into this. And of course, this storyline where anything that you do can affect the past. So the idea is that they can send text messages into the past that will change the future. So like you in your present day send things to yourself or other people in the past that will create these parallel universes based off of choices that they make. And that makes total sense for a visual novel, right? Like you can just say, oh, I'm going to send a text message to so-and-so, and then the game does its little glitch moment, and you go, oh, now this person thinks favorably of me, or I won $1 million, or blah, blah, blah. And now I'm living in that line. I don't actually go back and relive everything, but I have memories from the previous timeline that I'm in because I am the main character, or I am this person, or I did this thing to make sure that I could remember. It reminds me of some of the like really complicated stuff that happens near the end of Death Note. where like Light has to he like basically has to like hide pieces of the Death Note in a watch, but he doesn't remember that his watch has like a special thing inside of it. Like it starts to get really complicated, but I love that this book is only like 27 chapters long or something. Like the whole story is just one and done, and it kind of leaves you with this, there could be a million more stories, but it is only just this small thing because they want you to play the video game or do whatever. But yeah, I really like this. And Danny's calling out Butterfly Effect. Yeah, you're pretty much right. That Ashton Kutcher movie, it's very similar to that. But anyways,
it's equally as sad because I remember you watching this, Mike. Because I remember I came over and you were like, "Have you watched Steins Gate?" And I was like, "No." And we jumped into like episode 3 or 4, so you had to explain the first like 2 episodes, and I was like, "I'm so lost,
dude.
I'm so lost." I remember that.
It's amazing. It's great. I really am excited to finish this and report back on what I thought, because I'm probably just going to power through this week on top of all the other stuff I'm reading. But yeah, Steins Gate, man. I feel like this is one of those comics that people hate in the like manga world, and I'm sure there's a good reason for it. But I remember this being really, really in the same way that people hate Death Note, right? In that it's just kind of like over the top and too much and way more convoluted than it probably needs to be. But I really like this story, and I like even reading it now. I'm like, oh man, I loved all of these little bits and pieces of this book. So yeah, looking forward to finishing it, and hopefully it's as great as I remember at the end. So that's me. Yeah, I guess I don't know. That kind of wraps up this week's episode, unless you guys had anything else you wanted to talk about here. But we've already gone for so long on today's episode. Well, I guess then to wrap things up, next week's episode we are off, so this is not going to be a live episode. Kate and I sat down and we read a bunch of comped comics, stuff that we probably wouldn't have read in the past, but some publishers were nice enough to send them over to us. So we're giving some honest reviews. You know, when you send us a comic, you don't know what it's going to be, mixed bag of stuff. Kate and I read a bunch of different comic books, and the results may surprise you, I guess. But yeah, that's going to be fun. That'll be airing next week. And the following week, I guess I'll just say, I think I announced it in the episode that we recorded, but me and Kate and Brian are going to talk about everything and all things Scarlet Witch. Like, we're going to do a deep dive on this character a couple of weeks too late for the Doctor Strange movie, but it would be consistent for us at IRCB to be late to some sort of topic. So here we are. But yeah, until then, you can always follow us on Twitter. You can follow Nick at Death Star Plans. You can follow Rene at Rodrigo29. You can follow me at Mike Rapin in the show on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram at IRCB Podcast.
This episode first aired on Patreon and is possible because of our wonderful patrons. Join today for exclusive series access to IRCB Movie Club, Saga of Saga, and more. Join now at patreon.com/IRCB podcast.
If you haven't already, please rate and review our show. 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Yes, they have ratings. Or wherever you listen to podcasts, because we deserve it.
And please join the IRCB Discord community to chat comics and more. Plus, you can listen to our episodes live as we record every week. Check the link to our Discord in the show notes.
Podcasts grow best when spread by word of mouth. So why not tell your friends, family, and local comic book shop about IRCB?
You guys are killing me. Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music. You can find their stuff on infinityshred.com or infinityshred.bandcamp.com. Zander is a very cool guy who makes us sound very cool and puts up with everything that we say every week. He is our editor, and we love him to death. I want to say thank you to everyone who listens to the show. You are wonderful people. We love you to death. Thank you to Kev and Danny for hanging out with us in the Discord while we recorded today. Thank you to everyone who supports us on Patreon. You are the lifeblood that keeps this comic book podcast alive. Until next time, comics are good, and so are you.